So I'll start off with an introduction to myself. My name is Victoria Wilson. I'm a third year studying cellular and molecular biomedical science with a minor in Spanish at LSA, but I also work as the student auxiliary for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, so I am their student assistant. Today, I will be moderating a panel on how we can use art as activism, and I'll give a quick introduction to each of our panelists. First, we have Wesley Taylor. He is a graphic designer, a fine artist, musician, and a curator. He has spent many years scene building in the Detroit hip hop community as both an MC, a graphic designer, as an MC and a graphic designer. Taylor's most recent body of work revolves around the promise of the future. He imagines that the future is his client, and he is in charge of marketing for the future and branding its many possibilities. Next, we have Takeisha Jefferson. She is an international portrait photographer and artist based in Michigan. Her artistic journey began at the age of 9 and was further developed during her time as a military journalist. After serving in the Air Force, she established a successful photography business and continued to refine her craft in Auburn of Montgomery University. During this time, she expanded her Birthright series and developed a deep passion for art history. Lastly, we have Jennifer Maples, who is a talented painting and mixed media artist who uses her unique vision to explore mental health through art. Jennifer was born in 1991 and was raised in Detroit, Michigan. She draws inspiration from her personal journey with mental health, which started after a traumatic car accident in 2019. Her experiences led her to create Art is My Therapy, a brand that reflects her healing through art. Before we start this moderation, I want to give a little disclaimer that I've been battling allergies, so my voice might go out, but everything is fine. I'm going to start the panel and open the floor with the question of how do you use art as activism? And any of you are open to take that question.
We're going to turn this on first. So I love to use my art as activism by telling my story. We all have a story at the end of the day. So if I share my trials and tribulations, what I go through, what I've been through, it will basically help inspire someone else to tell their story and share what they've been through. So, kind of.
Teamwork, it's important. So activism for me started very early on. I think it was an inception of why my work is what it is. So I was in art history. I was not trained professionally initially. Let me start with that. I was being snobbed by people because I didn't have my degree. So I was like, I'm going to go to school and see what it's about, whatever. And so I went and I advocated all through school. My teacher was like, you just cannot stop protesting. But when I was in art history, all I saw was people looked like me, they were enslaved. Like that was everything that was being put in front of me. All of these, I'm looking for these beautiful portraitures and I'm like, why is everyone I see that looks like me enslaved? So I wanted to produce work that challenged that. I wanted to see like if we were able to be photographed, what would that look like? So it started with the work that I was doing there.
For me, I think there's a lot of different levels where in one part of my work with graphic design, I've helped co-found this organization called Design Justice Network, and it's a network of designers globally that think about design and justice and how those things can work together. They aren't necessarily complementary terms in the way that, going back to like narratives and how they've been put out there. Design is not necessarily a tool that can, I would say, just initially create justice and things like that. So that's one thing, is like challenging narratives, challenging practices. Also like this idea of space and creating space for artists, using an art history term, I think the gaze, GAZ, is really important when you think about people living with art and when people are making art and which gaze is on them, whose gaze is on them, is really important, I think, even as a basic level for activism within arts.
So, Jennifer, you mentioned that you like to display your activism by telling your own story. And I'm also hearing that you had some implications of wanting to mold art history, Takeisha. So what I'm seeing is a common theme of using art as a way to defy a norm and to make a statement. But what I also would see in that is maybe some political implications. So I'd like to know, as an artist, how do you prepare for the possibility of misinterpretation or politicization of your work or your opinion in your activistic art?
I would say for me, sometimes it's intentional and I want it. And I'm not trying to be funny when I say this, but my husband got 3 jobs. So I always tell him, like, I don't want him to step out and do something where he loses his job because we got 4 kids in college. But me, I can do a whole bunch. And I am my boss, so tell on me, right? And so with that, like, I have an upcoming exhibition, and it's loosely titled Avowed. I ripped up, I love books. Let me start with that. I'm an author. But I ripped up books based on the Confederacy and the Civil War. And I tore the pages and created crowns and adornments. And that was me kind of protesting against the false narrative with CRT and some of the other things when it comes to book bans and things like that. And I bought the book secondhand because I didn't want certain people to get money. But I wanted to show what it feels like to have things taken away from you, torn up, and what that looked like.
For me, I would have to say, I don't care. I love to use my work for me and me only. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. It's not for you. It's one of those things where I'm not going to try to please the whole world or please this person or this group of people, because at the end of the day, that's not what my work is for. It's for me. It's a mental release for me. So anyone who struggles mentally, I want them to sit there and come to me and say, hey, like, can we do something better, or can we expand this versus, I don't like that. We're gonna protest this art. No, we're not. This is my art. Art is subjective. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna love it, or you're gonna walk on.
I mean, I think I come from the standpoint that all art is political. There's actually no way outside of that realm. So for art to be politicized is actually what is supposed to be done to it. And so I usually get annoyed when people think that they can be outside of politics when they create things. And so I always have to remind people that even if you claim that your work is not political, that still does not absolve you from making political work. So like an example is like, I always use the example of like a museum, right? And how work is displayed in a museum. A lot of times, if the work is coming from, say, a white artist or somebody from, you know, the dominant part of culture, then extra tags aren't put on their name, but so they're not seem to be, you know, a Dutch artist if they were made, so they're not called a white Dutch artists from this village in the Netherlands, right, in order to qualify their work, which happens a lot when you talk about other artists, you know, or outside art or things like that. So just start, like, identity is political, and a lot of times we think that it can happen outside. It's just because it's not attributed by curators and people like that, but everybody has an identity and works from that framework, even if people think it's not happening that way.
Can I ask, how do you include your identity in your work as a way to convey a message?
Me? Okay, I think I just like, when it's conscious, it's hard for me to work. If I'm deliberately trying to say I'm putting my identity in this work, if I feel like I'm putting my experience in the work, then I feel like my identity will be there. So that's a short answer.
So I want to give a little bit of context that we kind of have experts on the past, present, and future here. Takeisha, she specializes in ancestral photography work, bringing back those stories. As you heard before, Wesley, he specializes in how we can brand and shape the future. And Jennifer, she specializes in a new emergent genre called trap art, which has molded the way that a lot of my generation expresses themselves in visual art. So I'd like to know, how do you guys think that art can be used to brand our present and our future, and how can we use ancestral elements to move forward in that progress?
That's a good question. Yeah.
That is a good question. Let me hear that one more time.
How can we use art to brand the future as well as our present, and use ancestral elements to aid in that branding?
I would have to say, because we're turning into a technology world, it's one of those get with the times kind of thing. Stay with the times, get with the times, move with the times, and basically don't forget about our past, because and the way to bring our past with the present is literally going back and maybe asking your grandmother or grandparents, like, hey, do you have some textiles from back when you were a child? Or do you have some old pictures? Because the old black and white pictures, you can tell when them is old. But it's like taking that history and kind of incorporating into the new style of technology and art, because AI is soon going to take over. It's going to be a big thing. And we have to basically kind of, I feel like, maneuver in so many ways with AI. So if we're taking this old material, these old photos, like stuff from our past, and then just bringing them and making them new, I feel like that can possibly happen. No? Do a little something.
I think with me, I think I'm even taking like my family's past. So a lot of, I think my love for photography was shaped by looking through photo albums of my great-grandmother and my grandmother. And I fell in love with portraiture because the way that they photographed was just brilliant. It allowed me to see my grandmother's childhood in her teenage years. And when I say my grandmother, I'm talking about my grandmother and my great-grandmother. I call them both grandma. And so, but the world wasn't showing me imagery of us the same way. So it was really weird for me outside of the house not to see me or people like me photographed the way that I saw in our photo albums and on our walls. And so I think that's kind of what I'm doing. And even though the people I'm photographing are modern day, I give you the illusion that they were photographed a very long, it's very intentional to challenge what you're seeing. So when you talk about the museum space, less than 2% of Black men and women are in galleries and museums across the world, 2%. It's not a lot. And so the fact that you get to see us here today is it's major. It's intentional, but it's major. And some of you I've had the pleasure of meeting before, but we're still minute even in that, but our footprint matters. I'm like, I like to leave my footprint. I'm gonna push down so there's evidence that we're here. And so I think all of it from past, future, and present is us leaving evidence and our voice, because we are political in the work that I'm saying something. When my motto is sitting with her head here, when my ancestors had to keep their head here, I'm forcing you to look my person in the eye. So there's so many levels to it, but I think, like you said, just us producing work, sitting here having an artist talk is activism.
I would say in terms of the future and thinking about, I think that there's a question of how can, and also understanding that art and media have always shaped the future. How we understand it, it always prepares us to be in it. It also always gives us a thing to look towards. And so, one example is, like, I think about, like, science fiction. Science fiction always prepares us for tomorrow, but also will give us the blueprint for things to create or whatever. Like, you mediate an image of a device that communicates with somebody, on the other side of the world. It's a box with lines being drawn and mediated, right? Then this box became a TV screen. You started to see it in like Dick Tracy cartoons, right? Wasn't necessarily a thing that people had access to, but eventually that became the present and is now our past, right? So art is always doing that. Space travel. Space travel is always being predicted in movies, right? In books. We are moving into that future. But I also think about like nation building as science fiction, right? I always joke that we are live action role playing the founding fathers' notion of what it means to be in a country or to be in a nation, right? And so we follow their rules from 1776. That was a design for many. It was political and also a design activity. They designed the United States, right? But I would also say that, there's these ideas of within, say, architecture, where I think about that as like being science fiction that happens really fast. So like architecture and city planning where, say, a neighborhood is being planned in like blueprints, photos, renderings, and things like that. This is what this neighborhood will look like in 50 years. But they're actually programming who's gonna be walking with their strollers in that neighborhood and getting you prepared 50 years down the line, who's gonna be there, what they're gonna look like, what they're gonna act like. But then also, the physical landscape might not look like this. These buildings might not be there, but these buildings will be there. It's not that difference in time scale than being like, well, there will be a colony like on this planet or whatever, So I'm always just thinking about like what are the tools and techniques that are actually being employed to preparing people for the future that are already in action, that in some ways prepare us, sometimes manipulate us, and sometimes will, fool us in different ways, but create a future.
So, in regard to this timeline of progression and the integration between design and technology, I'd like to know your perspective as an educator and how you feel this specific progress could have an implication in our educational system. How could it help our students to be more open to integrating design and art? Tech and art.
Yeah, I think so many different ways. I think imagination is really important, not just to say that as like, I don't know, not to say that lightly, but I often think about we are in battles of imagination and how to hone and wield imagination effectively. And so some people have imagination, some people don't believe in their imagination, but some people actually know how to like laser focus, put their imagination into action. And so I'm always thinking about that. And I would, going back to like this idea of like these photos or these things from, say, our ancestors or from intergenerational things. And I think it's what do you encourage people to be embedded in the source code that will inevitably have effect on the future. Like we always think that like we are in inevitable frameworks of governance, economy, and things like that, or even the things that we use, but like, I remember a time before Facebook, I remember a time before Instagram, and I also know how the impacts of those things have had societally, and I also know that they were created with rooms of 4 or 5 people that were the age of my students, that had the exact same brain power as my students. And so these people didn't think about inevitability, they thought about like shifting paradigms and things like that. So I'm always trying to, remind people that a paradigm could be shifted just by gathering people and how do you wield your imagination?
I wanted to speak to something you said there. It just, with art and activism, we have the ability to speak on things that matter to us as well, to amplify them. So I had the pleasure of interning at the Rosa Parks Museum for a few years in Montgomery, Alabama. And being from Michigan, it opened my eyes to a part of Rosa that I really didn't understand for her being raised here. and just even her story. But in the fourth grade books, all fourth grade students in Alabama have to come through the Rosa Parks Museum, or at least currently they do. And one of the things that many of the kids were taught that are in books was that Rosa didn't get out of her seat because her feet hurt and she was tired. And so that's where we get into narrative. So narrative representation, advocacy matters to me. And one of the things that I really learned about that I love to share with people is about the Birmingham Children's March, which was instrumental into our civil rights movement, because the president really didn't like seeing kids being water hosed on the television. It was children. And so now I want you guys to go back and I want you to think about black and white imagery that you see from the civil rights movement with water hoses and police dogs. I want you to think about those images, and I want you to realize those are not adults. Those were kids. And because they're black and white and we look at them in the hairstyles, you just assume those are adults, because who would ever do that to kids? Those are children. Those are teenagers. Those are kids that decided, I'm going to go try to fill the jails because they're arresting our parents and there's more of us. So we're going to leave school, we're going to get arrested, and we're going to fill the jails up. So then they can't get our parents. And that's what they did. And so, that part of I use that when I talk to children. I go, because people are like, you're too young, kids are too young, they can't do anything. They did a lot. And they can still do a lot, and they can do more than a lot of us encourage them to do. So when you're working with youth, their voice is impactful. Their voice is impactful. So it's important that, we kind of honor them through art, and those of us that can pass the torch and inspire them to use their medium to amplify their voice.
So a quick synopsis that I'm hearing is that imagination is important and censorship is rampant. There is a need for freedom of thought, but there is not much room allowed for that said freedom. So I would like to ask, due to those policing restrictions on art, and also the fact that art is a subjective field, how do we know when art or when activistic art is correct? When is art right? How do we know that your art is the way to go?
I would say it's based really kind of on your feelings, because I know for me, when I get up, when I'm done painting and I get up and look at my art, it's like a big, ooh, I did that. But it's also one of those moments of how are other people going to feel about this? And then I take into consideration, I care and I don't care, because I really want my art to just be more so like a freeness for everyone, a free space for everybody to come. And I know it's not going to be a free space for everybody to sit there and be like, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, I love that. Let me get that. But it's one of those, I wish it was, but it's still one of those moments of, okay, you might hate it. What do you hate about it? Or what do you dislike about it? Or what are you not? So, but at the end of the day, I'm still going to create what I want to create, because it's still my story. It's still me sharing and promoting and pushing. Because I've had someone tell me hey, you need to take writing out of your art. You need to take quotes out of your art. And I'm like, why? I'm a visual artist. Some people actually need that quote or those words to resonate in their mind so that they can get through their day. I know I do. So I feel like at the end of the day, no one should be able to tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go there, you can't go here. It's art. Art is art.
I also think that I just want to be a part of the conversation. So if we go back to the disparity of just people of color's art being seen, 98% of other people are talking, or a specific sector of other people are talking. So just to be able to have a conversation about Black women from a Black woman, I think is important. And a quote that I love to say is, I want people to be as comfortable with my absence as they are with my presence. Because it's okay when I'm not in the room. It's okay when I'm not in the gallery. Why are you uncomfortable when all of my work is in the gallery? That's the question.
So, identity, I want to bring forth the theme of the facilitation of diversity of thought. And also, I would like to ask, how do you, as an artist, go about cultural collaboration? How do you have conversations that are with people outside of your identity? I recognize that we are at the Juneteenth event, which is more focused around Black Americans, but as a melting pot country, I feel, or it may be important that you interact with the people around you. So as an artist, how do you or how would you go about culturally collaborating with people outside of your identity?
Get over here. That's about it. It's like, hey, we're both creators. Let's do something. Let's work. Let's put our mind together, because 2 minds is better than 1. 3 minds is better than 2. 4 minds is better than 3. Let's work. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. Like, come on, baby, come on. Let's work, because we don't know. Your story might help elaborate my story a little bit more. My story might help elaborate your story a little bit more. Or our stories might come together and create something that's so powerful that might create social change within the world. So it's one of those things where don't basically put yourself in this box to just want to basically only want to work with your community. Go outside and sue who else is struggling and maybe needs just a little bit of help, a little bit of a boost. And like, you never know where things may go, because whereas photographer, visual artist, I want to get into photography, but I don't really want to take it serious. We could tag team on something and then go work with somebody in Southwest, and they might sit there and bring graffiti to the whole project. So don't just put yourself in that box to just want to sit there and work with your people. All of us our minds can go far. I can't do sci-fi, honestly speaking. Sci-fi, let's work. You see, but you never know.
I need access to other people's resources, their money, and so their connections, their museums, their galleries. So as far as in my work specifically, probably not. I am 25% European, so I'm helping. I'm trying to think. No, seriously, I really am. But most of my family is multiracial. But I love partnerships. I think our work should still be uniquely ours for the most part, and that we collaborate together. I'm a part of multiple organizations. The Dearborn Fine Arts Club is mostly Arab, and it's amazing to work with artists there. The Detroit Fine Arts Club is mostly African American. It's nice to be there. I'm the moderator for the IPSY Fine Arts Club. It's mostly Caucasian, and I moderate, so I don't have a problem being in spaces, but I think that when it comes to the conversation and the body of the work that I produce, it needs to be by me, because, again, like I said, I've been silenced so much, so I really think that's important. But I think collectively, we could come together in a space and do things.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it. I mean, I think I have a couple of different approaches to this idea of, you brought up this idea of diversity of thought, right? Or diversity in general. And one side of it is, I think, coming up as in like hip hop and making that as a teenager all the way up until my 40s. It's always been a collaborative effort. And so I think making work in that way always pushed against this idea of authorship and how it's understood in the arts, and this false notion of individual authorship. And so there's a lot of like banding together for resources, banding together to create like networks and things like that. So like, that's how I was trained as an artist, was to be collaborative. And so that's one way. But the other thing that I think, so along with like creating or being a co-founder of an organization, Design Justice Network, which is a network, right? prior to that, I was doing and co-doing the research along with my partner, Il Weaver, who came up with, who's an MC by the name of Invincible. We started this record label called Emergence in 2007. That work led to that research and everything we were doing, and in a very real material way was what generated Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. So we actually did the initial research around that, and this idea of complexity was really important to this idea of like generating change and complexity on a lot of different levels. And so like network theory and decentralized networks and all of those things, when you talk about like, not just diversity, right? You can have a diverse room, but just diverse rooms actually don't, by nature, don't activate anything. So you actually have to have a set of principles, a set of rules. Complexity happens based on like a set of like very basic rules for action to actually happen or a shift or a change. And so thinking about what frameworks do you borrow from in order to think about diversity? Another thing I think about when we talk about like representation and who's in the room and like blending this idea of like say justice and design, well, the justice part actually comes from the unrepresented side that should have gone into like these design practices in the first place. And a lot of that is informed by like Black feminist theory, right? And so like that's when we talk about justice, we're actually thinking about that thinking and the lack of that thinking that goes into these practices when we have like these adverse effects from design products or projects or whatever. I would say most of the time is because they're not considering, say, what Kimberly Crenshaw was considering when she thinks about society or things like that. So we're trying to always like instill those values and ideas.
Yeah, so in relation to the discussion on collaboration, consideration, and principles and rules, what first comes to my mind is morals. And that tends to be a process that is more so intrapersonal. Those are things that you explore yourself, that you build and grow as you evolve as a person. And so I would like to know, as an artist, do you feel that it is important for an artist to go out and well-round themselves, for them to go out and explore a culture without needing a collaborator? Like, do you need a person of a certain culture to tell you about the culture in order for you to learn yourself? And do you feel that that is a quality that artists should explore?
Is it, just to answer that a little better, is there like an example, or are you just thinking about in a general sense?
So I would say an example would be you as a Black male, you want to highlight a certain community. You know nothing about them, you have never contacted anyone within that community, but you go out yourself and you research and you do work within a community that does not require someone else giving you a lesson. Because I've recognized as a Black woman, when we complain about the lack of our cultural representation, a lot of times the response to that is tokenization, and we get offended. We feel upset that we always have to tell someone else this, and this about our culture. So do we consider that from other perspectives in the fact that we should be going out and actively learning instead of waiting for teachers to
I do agree, but I also feel like I'm inclined to talk to someone after I've done my research. Maybe I go to them with some knowledge versus going to them asking for everything, right? I know when I started my first series, my birthright series, I just learned about birthright trips, and I was like, well, what would it be like if African Americans could take a birthright trip? Like, what would that look like? And I posted one of my pictures in a group on Facebook, a photography group for women, Black women specifically. And a woman in the group that was first generation Black, she told me it was appropriation. It's like, excuse me? And so she said that I was appropriating African culture with my work. And I was like, well, why are you in the Black woman photography group then? But anyway, I was really challenged by that. And I really had to own, like, I did my research, I did my 23andMe, I did my ancestry. And I'm like, well, this is my DNA. Like, it had me questioning if I had rights as a Black woman to even touch on continents that my DNA or countries that my DNA was connected to. I stand flat-footed on it now, but that was like a situation for me, even within this sector, to have the conversation. But I think respectfully, research and then go, but don't go with no information, asking someone to kind of feed you everything.
I want to switch gears a little bit and ask a little bit of a more personal question. In regards to like those challenges or those pushbacks that sometimes you might face as an artist with the subjectivity of art, what is your intake process?
I hate pushback. I don't like pushback because when you give me pushback, I feel like you're actually pushing me. And my intake process is on the inside. Yeah, I'm that little red man from Inside Out that's like, ah! Because I'm like, no, we're gonna do this. We're moving forward. And they're like, no, and I'm like, no, we're gonna move forward because I said so. But the response that I actually will give is, well, what's the pushback? What is it we have to process? What is it that we're going through? What is it that you don't like? What is it we need to change? Because at the end of the day, everybody, like I said, everybody's not going to like everything that I do, I create, or the next person. So if I get pushback, yes, I'm going to be mad on the inside, but I have to take that in consideration because, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to work together to get the job done.
More specifically, I want to ask about the emergence of trap art, and I want to know about any like pushback or feedback you received on that end and how you've put that into your work.
Yeah, I've received a lot of pushback on that. I actually had a woman who owns a gallery come up to one of my pieces and tell me, oh, this is very powerful by itself. You should take the quote out. I looked at her and I said, why? And she was like, the piece can stand by itself. The piece is this and it is that. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a visual artist. I forget things a lot. She was like, well, it still can stand by itself because it's doing too much with the quote. And I said, well, this piece is not for you. Because if this piece is saying too much for you, then it's not for you. Because my message is, at the end of the day, is to help people like me. I'm dyslexic, so I need sometimes a reminder for certain words because I can get words jumbled up. I might sit there and say Juneteenth, but forget the N in the spelling. It's hey. But it's still one of those things of give me a visual of what the spelling is so I can sit there and keep it in mind, 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 to the point where I can sit there and walk past this painting or walk past this and already know like, oh, it makes me feel this way or it makes me feel that way. So my pushback to her was, this is not your painting. Because if you are having to tell me that I need to take this and take that and take this out, that I'm not your artist because my art is about being gritty, about being raw, about being open, about being free. So if you can't accept me being free, then go find another artist.
With that, we reached the halfway mark on the panel discussion, so I'd like to open the floor to any questions from the audience.
Be shy, don't be shy.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm Hall Director. Takeisha, good to see you again. So I work with a lot of first-year students at the University of Michigan, and I'm wondering from the panel, what advice would you have for an incoming first-year student who's interested in the combination of art and activism?
Be you, be raw, be free. Don't let anyone try to place you in a box and try to tell you that your art is this small when it can be this big. Is one of those things. Don't feel like you have to conquer everything within your first year or first semester or first day. Like allow everything to just flow through you, because I didn't really find my technique until 3 years later. And it took me having to draw. And I'm like, I'm making dope stuff, but nothing's coming, like, it's not really happening for me. So it's like, tell them to just be free. Tell them to stop using this. Cut this off and let this open up and let this say what it needs to say.
Also, to be focused on their individuality within the work. Sometimes someone's sitting to your left, your right, you know, or in the room, in your mind, be a phenomenal artist, and then you measure yourself based off of that. Analogy I came up recently is your signature. Imagine you walked into the room and everybody in the room's writing your name. Why are you writing my name? And so as an artist, many times, instead of trying to write our name, we're trying to write other people's names. And if you could focus just on writing your name and writing your name the best way you can, then, because when you really do find other work or the way that art and activism can be fused, it's the individuality of that artist that you're drawn to. And so I think that's how you find you, not trying to be someone else.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying this to over intellectualize the conversation, but I would say, like, read theory. I think it's really important. Read the writers, read the people that actually have grappled with these things and then have translated their experiences into words or books or things like that. One is because it's really important that you're not always reinventing the wheel, right? There are lessons from the past that are there for you to internalize and to process. So I think that's important as a first-year student, to be a student of activism. And I think another thing is really important is beyond like being able to like amplify your voice, speak out on things. I think as a skill, as an artist, trying to translate things and then to project them back into the world, is to actually develop like a listening practice, which I think I'm saying these words and there are things around that, but I would say be curious about the idea of listening and having that as a practice and figuring out that for yourself.
So personally, I'm carrying a lot of like subjectivity, and as a person with a bio and engineering background, I really love yes, no, exact answers. Art does not have many of those answers, so I would like to know, how do you measure your own effectiveness as an artist or the effectiveness of your activistic work?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I think in those terms, right, thinking about metrics and maybe say in the sciences looks a little bit different. I think in the arts you have a lot of like leverage you could ignore this idea of metrics kind of, or I think what's great in the arts is you can redefine like what metrics mean for you, and you can actually make those things kind of poetic. Also, so for instance, a project that I worked on with my collective called Complex Movements, when it comes to terms of funding and arts funding, sometimes you do have to show your effectiveness, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they just give you money and like, cool, we understand like these matrices of, say, sciences or these matrices of the institution are really not helpful when you're trying to create, right? And so we're like, so there's a lot of like, thank goodness, like no strings attached money in art. But sometimes you're still trying to figure out, well, what's happening with this project? And so in one of our metrics that we created, it was how many, I'm trying to remember, but like unexpected connections we could make between two people. So the most unlikely connections we could make within this performance or art or gathering we had. And so we didn't like take numbers or surveys, but that was a goal of ours, was to create these unexpected like matches and groupings of people. And then we would talk about in terms of like, how did that go? Well, then we would say, well, yeah, but this person met that person. They never did this, or these people are doing this work. These people were siloed in the work that they were doing, and they actually have a project together. And so we're able to like rate our effectiveness in that way, but we made that up. And like, we're also not gonna show that in a chart, in a graph, but we do have material things that we can go to, like websites that are projects now where people actually met in our performance, right?
Part of what I do is try to acquire real estate. So when I'm saying real estate, like a wall in the gallery, someplace, and not just for me, but for people of color. So advocating to get some visual representation for us. So that is what I'm measuring. Were we able to succeed and do that? Did we get this exhibition? Did I get someone in? I referred someone. Did they get in? So making sure that we're expanding that way.
So those are your personal opinions on which metrics should matter in gauging activistic art, but I'd like to know, in such a complex and diverse society, how do we all get on one accord about where activism should go, where our society should go? Do you have a theory or an expectation of that?
Get a better president.
I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, with research, reading, looking at historically the inhabitants of this earth, I just don't see. I actually said to my husband a couple days ago, I'm like, do you realize we have the conscious choice to be peaceful? We could really all just get along. We've never chose to do that. And so because of that, someone's always, even in the peace, will want power.
How do you think art has aided in that journey?
I think art has aided. But when you look at the wars, what did they destroy? Outside of the people, they destroy the art. They destroy the history. That's our reference. We go back. They plummet things where we have evidence. So we have art and we can use it for as long as we can, but the opportunity, they destroy books. So you can't read, so you don't know. Oral record is really vital. So it's important that you're able to share and to be able to talk and again, have the books, but even some books lie to us. I was taught all through elementary school that Columbus discovered America by my teachers. And then I get to high school and I thought, well, actually. And then, I thought this was a really cool, nice guy all the way through like 8th grade. Then I find out he's like this barbarian. I'm like, I didn't have this information when I was in kindergarten. Like, what are we doing? But again, this is our education system. So again, it's like, how do I know what book to find if I don't know the book exists? So again, sharing as much as you can, teaching as much as you can. That's my soapbox, I'm sorry.
I actually agree, and I'll piggyback a little more. It's sad, but we actually need negative and positive to run the world. And the reason why I say that is because it's just like turning on these lights, using batteries to operate this or operate that. If you have 2 batteries going positive, is it really going to work for a long period of time? Is it really going to turn on? If you have a negative and a positive working together, they're creating something. They're creating electricity. They're creating power. They're turning your cell phone on for you. So I feel like we actually, to get on one accord, it would be nice, but it's, in actuality, we kind of need that negative to kind of still drive the gears for the positivity, because it's just kind of like having God and the devil. We have to have that chaotic world to sit there and be like, all right, y'all, we need to sit down. And now we got to sit here and sit down and settle everything out. But then it's like, once everything settles out, it's like, do we always want that piece of, oh, everything is all rainbows and butterflies, yay? Or do we need that little bit of wake up, that jump, like, okay, We need this. It's not really rainbows and butterflies. We really do need like that little hiccup, like, okay, let's do something better, let's do something different. Because if we're always staying complacent and trying to be this peaceful world or whatever, we won't work. We won't work because we're always going to sit here and just want to be happy and people are going to get tired of that, I feel like.
I mean, I would also just say, like, I would also kind of resist the idea around coming to one accord. And I'll try to make some connections to, like, art, right? And coming to one accord, and, like, how I'll make a couple of analogies or connections. So if we were to, for me, like, streamlining things down to, like, one accord or one issue or whatever, I would say is this idea of, like, simplifying or coming to empirical ways of moving or creating change. And then I would also say that when we talk about, like, these ideas of, like, empirical or streamlining, we borrow that from notions of modernity and modernism. And what modernism did to the arts was stripped everything away. So the reason why, how we understand when we say art is generally through the lens of modernism, usually, and when we talk about it. But it also carries a lot of baggage around what's included and what's not included. So for instance, when we talk about modernism and we talk about streamline or simplicity, right, or simplified, that's a white male European notion of colonizing visual space and creative space. So what happened when we got to, like, modernism being, like, the dominant way of understanding art as of right now? Well, the last thing that happened was we got rid of, like, this idea of decoration. Decoration, or the decorative arts, is attributed to, like, sex and race, right? So decoration was attributed to women. Women, you guys decorate things. You're interested into the non-essential parts of art, right? So therefore, we must rid of that. But there were several erasures prior to that one in order for us to understand art in the way that we understand it. And it goes closer to this idea of, like, empirical evidence, empirical ideas, simplicity, and things like that. So the flip side is, in my mind, is this idea of holding complexity. So how do you hold multiple accords in order to move forward, in order to create change or to enact activism?
Yeah, so earlier there was a comment made about how we couldn't come to one accord because I believe, Takeisha, you said it, we're consciously, like, if we consciously made the effort, we could all live in peace. And that's really obviously most of us in cases have to consciously work toward a better society. How are you as an artist working consciously toward a better society?
I thought you were going to say peace. I was like, oh, I'm not doing it. Oh, I was so nervous. I'm a disruptor. Okay. Ooh, better question. Ask it one more time. I was so stuck on the other part.
How are you making conscious contributions to society?
Oh, I think the visual that I put out. It's so interesting because I talk about the absence of certain art, and I've been blessed to be in spaces where I'm surrounded by what I'm saying is absent, right? And I even tell, like, people with my children will never understand the thing I'm advocating about because they've been in museums, they're photographed all the time. Like, it is normal for them to be, people are like, oh, what does it feel like? They're like, it's another day. What do you mean? My photograph. And again, they're not cocky about it at all, but they don't know any other way. And so I think if I continue to do this, I want to branch outside of my family to start bringing this art form to children specifically, and doing a lot of more community engagement with the youth when it comes to art and actually introducing them to all of the arts. I want to do like a art mixer, kind of like, you know how they do I've seen it. I've been married for 26 years. Hear me out. Is it speed dating?
Yeah.
Okay, so my husband knows. Anyway, so the speed dating, I want to do speed dating art. So imagine a kid in a room for 2 hours, And every 10 minutes, you change the art medium that they're working with. But they only get 10 minutes, and they get all the new tools put in front of them, and they go through this whole 2-hour segment. And after 2 hours, you ask them which one did they like. You kind of start fusing the mediums down until they find the one that they really might be interested in. So that's something I want to do, because the arts are being pulled out of the school districts. Art teachers are being laid off. Teachers that wanted to just teach math are being forced to bring art in. And so trying to find ways for artists to bring art back to the youth at low or no cost. No cost, preferably. I need money, thank you.
I like the idea of the speed dating exploration, and that brings up a question I had written down earlier. How do you determine the scope of your work? How do you determine the media that goes into it, the message, how far you want it to go?
God taps me on my shoulder. It's one of those things where I love acrylic, but I'll have in my mind, like, yeah, I'm gonna do fabric because I wanna incorporate some fabric sometimes and do something different. God would be like, nope, nope, stay what you're doing. I got a message that I need you to send with this one. And it's like, okay, all right. But then it's like, I have tried fabric on a couple of pieces, and I'm like, God, see, I told you we could do this. He was like, nope, that message is not strong enough. And I'm like, what do you mean? And the message is basically, you're not putting yourself in there. You're putting fabric, you're putting a piece of you, but it's not fully you. And I'm like, I get it, but I'm still creating. No, it's not the same, because you're not having to sit here and actually paint and work and work and work. You're actually just cutting this little fabric out, boop, 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 and then gluing it to the canvas, so it's not the same energy as if you had to sit there and paint that outfit and create that outfit and do this and do that. So it's like, that message, let me go back to what I told you to do.
I mean, I think, to me, scale and scope usually are in like terms of like time for me. So I'm always thinking, I've learned lessons around time in making art and projects where if I don't give it enough time or enough of a runway, then I get burnt by it because I'm not allowing it to breathe. So if I'm thinking in terms of like months, in 6 months this will happen, or in 3 months I'll get this back. That's not how I think. So now I think in terms of years and decades. And that's how I allow for a project or an idea or to work with other people to fully mature, for ideas to like really get out there. And the other thing is, I think this idea of like time, sometimes slowing times down is a way to like disrupt the way, like being a designer. A designer is trained in efficiency, right? We're actually trained to be efficient in actually doing things fast and to create, in general, money for the thing that we create. That is the goal of design if you want to break it all the way down. There are other uses for it, but the core of it is to make as much money in as short amount of time. So to flip that, I think about design in terms of long term. How do you actually create a good idea, and how much time does that actually take? Without the constraints or imaginary constraints outside of, like, say, capitalistic demands. But also, I think that just like time is important, because like I'm working towards change that I probably will not see. So I'm also like under that constraint of being like, whatever I make, hopefully is like a chain reaction to multiple actions that lead to worldwide or, you know, societal, and I say shifts that could be defined in many different ways, but time is important when I think about scope.
So I want to bring back the conversation about scope a little bit more to the ancestral influences. I know when I read up on you, Takeisha, some of your influences were Deborah Willis and Carrie Mae Weems. I don't know if you've seen, but pretty sure it's Balenciaga. Carrie Mae Weems just did a promo with A$AP Rocky and Rihanna. And upon seeing the project, I was elated at the fact that they were displaying Black fatherhood in such a soft and caring way. And I feel as though that's a theme that has not been so actively explored in the media. And it was great that someone as monumental as Carrie Mae Weems did do that project. So I say that to ask, like you said, you're working toward change that you feel like may not even be here at the end of your journey. Well, how do you figure out what themes should be explored in your work? How do you figure out what's important for you to display? And what do you think is important now for these future generations to be displayed?
I think some of it is the things that are happening can really be impactful. You had asked a question earlier in reference to like our intake as well. I did a piece some years ago, excuse me. It was a wedding dress. And I started writing names of people of color who had been murdered through police violence. And I had to keep stepping away from it. And then I took, excuse me, shell casings and I adorned the wedding dress with bullet shell casings. And I had to keep going away from it because there's so much to take in. But I thought it was an important message. I don't know, current times, things that affect my family, things like that.
All right. We do only have about 20 minutes left in the discussion, so I'd like to open the floor again to questions from the audience.
I'm John Rodriguez. I'm a communicator here on campus. And I was wondering if, when you think about creating art, do you sometimes think of what's the message you want to put out there and then kind of move backwards? Or is it more important for you to just reflect on like the moment at a time and let your art come out of that? So for me, I do a lot of graphic design work, and there's a lot of trying to be intentional about driving the direction I want people to go in. So sometimes it may not be my genuine self, but I'm thinking this might have a bigger impact. So that's what I produce. But how do you guys approach your art in this context?
Well, I know with trap art, or trap fine art, I know I love to create messages that's going to be present, past, future. Because at the end of the day, the way my brain works is I'm looking at what's right now, but I'm also watching for what may happen next week, next month, next year. But I'm also looking at further down in the future for like 5, 10, 20 years, because I feel like, kind of like Tupac, my art's not gonna sit there and I'm not going to be the one to change the world, but my art is going to be the one to inspire those around me to help change the world. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to do with our work. My work should be able to inspire the next to sit there and move in the direction of that I was probably going, but they can go deeper. Because maybe what I was talking about, even though it's my life story, what I was talking about probably wasn't deep enough for social change, community change. Okay, cool. So what they may talk about next is, you know what, let's go raw, let's go deep into what's going on in the world right now instead of trying to focus on what's about to happen next week or what's about to happen in the future. So their focus may be a little more different, whereas my focus is focusing on everything, and theirs may be just right here, which is actually great, because if their focus is right here, they're going to basically tackle not everything, but tackle a lot of stuff right in that point in time to sit there and set something up for the next person.
Questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Madeline, and I work in student well-being on campus. And Takeisha, I was thinking about when you were talking about how powerful that wedding dress project was for you, that something when we're talking about wellness and well-being with students is that our students care so much about a lot of things, which is incredible. And we have to do a lot of work around kind of that balance so that they can sustain that energy to keep doing that activism. And one of the things that we talk about, in addition to some of those system changes and self-care, is art as a way of release. And so I'm curious about how you balance activism and taking care of yourself when that common kind of like self-care is also how you're expending a lot of emotional and physical and mental energy and labor.
Thank you so much for your question. I actually ended up writing a book about self-care last year. I need to publish it. I'm an author with like books in queue. I have a lot published, but I have a lot more. It's like I have to pick what I'm doing. I will say I paint when I am having moments to good, or I cook a lot. It'll be very obvious that I'm trying to get through something. I have a solo that opens up next month on the 6th. And like probably a week ago, I was doing a lot of painting, not what I needed to do for my exhibition, but my exhibition was heavy. And I just needed, I'm all about, there could be a fire in the room and I'm reading a book. I've learned to pull away. So it's important. And so I appreciate you asking, but I do think self-care is important because if I weather myself completely down, I'll be no good. A lot of these topics are charged. And they're not just topics, they're experiences, right? And you can get really upset and angry with it. And so your emotional prowess can get jaded. And so I do have to kind of step back. But then at the same time, we also have to think about who's championing it. If not me, then who? I remember someone asked me once, why is all your work about this? Why do you always talk about this? And I'm like, she would rather me like just take pretty pictures or do something else. And I'm like, I could do that. But what's wrong with me doing, somebody else is doing that. This is the charge I have. I don't charge this on everyone else. I don't think all artists have to insert like forceful, I guess, activism into their work, but I chose to do it, and I think that's okay. So, yeah.
I would just also add on to like this idea of care. And so with the organization Design Justice Network, we've actually like centered care as the most important part of activism. And so like this effort was brought to us and is led by a designer by the name of Denise Shante Brown, who was an exceptional like young designer. She also has a firm called Black Women Flourish. But I think from her standpoint, coming into doing this work, like activism overlap with design, she like really started to like observe that burnout was the biggest thing. So going back to this idea of time, like when you talk about like activism, usually it's around this idea of urgency. And so urgency will inevitably like create burnout when you're on the front lines of, any type of protest movement or movement in that way. And so a lot of the care work, and so which was really amazing is that she was also granted like a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant to like do this work within the network. And so a lot of it is somatics training for designers. A lot of it is, gathering around this idea of care, communal care, self-care, other forms of care, and pushing the word care as just not like a buzzword or just a term, and actually like, what does that mean? What is that, when that word is thrown out there, how does that land on people? How is it acted on people and things like that? And so yeah, like centralizing like care as a way to combat like burnout is, I think, really important. And I really agree with when she was like, we need to centralize this within this work. It never dawned on me, but like I was in full support when I realized like, actually, this is very necessary.
I think it's important for children, though, too, like to have an outlet with art, in the fact that some kids are not even introduced or have that release. And when I say art, I'm not just talking about like 2D, spoken word, poetry, writing a book, cooking, gardening, just all of the different things that they could possibly do to have an outlet could bring, again, the peace that we need.
So Jennifer, I know I had a question, we might have discussed it a little bit earlier, about how, being that you work in trap art, an emergent art genre, you have a bit of a younger target audience. And I wanted to know, how do you feel that art, mental health, and activism intersect in that younger generation, more specifically, people who are maybe within your and I's age group? Does that make sense? How is it to make art that is targeting mental health for a young perspective?
I would have to say it's more so getting with their times, and that's basically what my art really is based on, or for the trap art part. It's one of those things of, I always wanted to do something that's, because I know I'm young, 33 years young. But it's one of those things where I wanted to make sure that I'm relatable to the younger people, because I didn't really have anybody my age that I could relate to, for real, for real. It was just one of those things of, oh, okay, Family Matters, oh, okay, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But it was like all of them were older. It was like nothing really at my age group of what's going to help me with my mental, what's going to teach me, what's going to, make me prosper in life. So that's why I create, basically, I guess you can kind of say, young art, to basically grab the youth in, because I'm not trying to go for people my age, I'm not trying to go for people in their 20s, and I'm not trying to go for teenagers, I'm trying to go for the babies. Because the babies are the ones that need protection and the ones that need help and guidance in a lot of different ways. It's like one of those things of, we give these to the kids, say, hey, go get on YouTube, go play on a cell phone, go play video games. You don't know what their kids are seeing. So if I can create art that's going to sit there and be relatable to them, that they're going to be like, that looks like me. It probably is. Tell your mama to buy it. It's one of those things of, give a kid an image and give them a reminder of something that's going to be relatable to them. Something that they can sit there and reflect on, because what we have today, in today's time, is our age. It's old. We have to kind of get with the times for these kids, because these babies is out of control. And that's why I want to go young, because if I can get them at like 8, 9, 10, when they're very impressionable, still trying to figure out life, and, oh, I like this. This is hot. Don't touch it. It's like, kind of like, let me help your mind. I don't want to control you. I don't want to program you. I want to teach you that mental health is real. Life is real. Things can happen, but it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be you. If people want to tease you, walk away. Those are not your people. So it's one of those things, like, kind of just want to have them kids be like my little kids, because I don't have any kids. So it's like, I want everybody to be my baby.
Okay, with that, I'd like to open the floor once more for audience questions.
Hi, my name is Casey. I'm going to be going into my second year as a grad student in the dance department. And I had a talk with a DEI professional on campus, and I was like, what is your biggest challenge in this work? And she said, my job is to critique my employer, which can be more of a gray area than you might think. And so my question to you all is, what, if you don't mind sharing, what have been some of the biggest run-ins or like challenges that you have experienced as an artist slash activist that, you know, you're dealing with people who have maybe resources that help you get your work further and reach more people. So what have been some of the challenges in the field?
I had a situation once. It was, I think the way it affected me possibly was the way that I was going to respond in this work environment. And so I was the artist in resident at the Van Gogh Immersive in Detroit. I was the last one for the whole country. They stopped the program after me. I didn't do anything. I promise. It was like before I even finished. But so what happened was, again, it's Van Gogh. I'm down by the gift shop. I have my setup. If you guys saw my work, it's black and white portraiture, right? All of these are framed, and it really didn't matter what my work was, but I just want you to get the scene. I'm sitting at the table. I have my spiel ready. Hey, my name's Takeisha, fine art. Woman walks up to the table. It's day 19. I did 42 days. It's like it was jail. I'm sorry. So it was day 19. She walks up and she says, "Why are you here?" I went, "Oh, I'm the artist in resident." And so she says, "No, why are you here?" My daughters are sitting here. My daughters went. I went, so I had to get them to circle back. Because again, I'm here, I'm working for this company, and I'm just, I go back. I've learned the slow blink. And keep your mouth closed. And I go, "Ma'am, I'm the artist in resident. If you have any problems or concern, you can go speak to the manager." She was upset that I was even in the building. Because there was black portraiture, fine art. And like I said, it doesn't matter if I was doing trap art. You didn't have a problem when you were up with Van Gogh and you didn't see a black woman's face or a black man's face. So she was really upset. And so it's just, how do I respond? And I chose peace because I wanted to finish the residency. But if it would have been day 42, it would have been a different story.
Did we still have our question?
Hi, my name is Allie. I'm an undergrad here at the university. I feel like my generation is just starting to get their voice into the world of activism. So my question is, what have you guys done to kind of stand out about the criticism you might have received from this crazy society that we live in, and what advice would you give to a younger activist that wants to have their voice heard, and to people like my generation on how to get that out and how to stand out against that type of criticism?
Stand your ground and don't let nobody push you. That's the best way. You're gonna always receive some type of pushback. As long as you're strong and confident about what you are being an activist about, and that you are going to stand firm. If they sit there and want to be like, "Oh, no, I'm gonna give you this." Nope. It's like, don't let anyone try to run over you, because that's what a lot of things, especially in my field, what I get sometimes is some people want to try to control what I do far as art, far as what I create, far as what I do. And I used to be that person, be like, okay. Somebody used to try to tell me like, "Oh, your work is too expensive." And I would say, "Okay, I'll lower the prices." And then I started realizing like, no, I work too hard. I've have too much talent to sit here and to sell this big piece of art for $20. So it's standing your ground, knowing your value, and knowing your worth. Don't let anyone push you. Say no. You can say no too. The power in no is everything. I promise you. I used to be a yes girl. I used to be like, "Okay, yes. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I got you." And I started getting burnt out a lot by always saying yes to everybody and yes to everything. So when I started learning the power in no, I really don't have, my phone don't even ring anymore. I don't have no friends. Nobody wants to talk to me because I tell them no. And I will stand my ground, because a lot of people will try to change my mind. I'll be like, "No, You can't change my mind unless it's something you give me a valid reason as to why to change my mind, then okay. But if it's something where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm very strong about, no. And today's generation, I want you guys to say no. I want you guys to give pushback and continue to make some type of change, because your generation is going to be the one that actually makes a difference down the road for the other generations. My generation is basically the ones that's getting it started. We're the ones that has that wheel turning for you guys right now. And because some of us are getting older, we need you guys to sit there and step up and take that initiative and be like, yeah, what they said, no.
Thank you. Oh.
I was just also going to say, thinking about it in terms of, I borrowed this from one of my collaborative partners, Sage Crump. And one thing about, when talking about like just being persuasive or to change minds or whatever, she always would buck against the idea, and she still does, against this idea of like preaching to the choir as being a bad thing. And she's like, actually, the choir needs to harmonize, right? It actually needs to, work as a choir. So you actually have to tend to it in order to get a message across. And then matched with that is the goal. I'm saying, according to her, and I've internalized this like as a way of moving, is not thinking about changing minds as far as oppositional, polar opposites, right? You're actually, if you can influence or affect or impress an idea of somebody sitting lateral or close to you, then actually these things become more chain reactions and move outward, instead of like bumping your head up against the wall to oppositional people that are completely opposed to you. So those are models that I think about that kind of give me hope in thinking about like if what I'm doing has impact or effect of the things that I'm saying, and understanding like the nature of what you're doing, that I think is you already said, is you are going to be criticized. You are going against, I would say, conventional knowledge or what is already understood. And so you're always going to receive pushback in moving in those ways.
Thank you. With that, we have 2 minutes left in our discussion, so I'd like to pose our closing question and ask each of the panelists, how do you plan to reflect and/or explore upon the themes that we've discussed today?
Say that again?
How do you plan to reflect on or explore the themes that we've discussed today?
So I'm a reflector. I reflect on a lot of things. I reflect on my life daily. Can't help it. I'm not even trying to be funny. I might have a painting done next week off of the reflection of just today, because it was a powerful kind of conversation that we had, a lot of different views and everything was exposed. But I'm one of those that I might go home and make a piece where there's going to be, of course, some words in it, okay? But it's like, I might take a big piece and take the Juneteenth or something, the colors, because it's just one of those things where, like I said, I reflect on everything. I don't know.
I think obviously taking in the artist talk, I think for me, one of the beautiful things is meeting the other artists, being able to see their work, adding them to like the discography of the artists that I know. So it'll probably be more researching the artists that I was able to meet.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably like, I'm jetting to Detroit right now, so in the car, I'll probably be thinking about this conversation and just running it back and seeing what gems were out there. And I'm always thinking about the input of information and what I internalize and what I, end up regurgitating in other spaces from what I heard today.
First, I'd like to thank the audience for their attendance and the panelists for their insight. That ends our panel discussion.